Hello. So today I wanted to talk about SSRIs and a little bit on SNRIs. These are cousins, but really I could go to depth on the whole class later or individually. They have a lot of different farm they can go through. But to notice these two first, this is probably the main focus for on today. Uh, SSRI is selective serotonin receptor inhibitor. Sorry about any noise. And some names you might recognize are Prozac and Zoloft, especially Zoloft. But these two names are the brand names of fluoxetine and sertraline. So this is Prozac and this is Zoloft. And the big difference that shows up in the mechanism is this is fluoride and three of them, and this is two chlorides. But something you notice from all four of these is the nitrogen, right? And that's really important for binding. But to start with, fluorine versus chloride, right? So if you notice the three fluorides and one carbon, this is called trifluoromethyl. So three fluorides and one methyl. And this is super extremely electronegative. So they pull electrons from the ring away, and that keeps it more stable in the body and less reactive because the electrons are gone from these, so it doesn't work as good and it stays in the body longer. And it makes it lipid loving, and because they do not like water and they don't form hydrogen bonds. So the pulling of electrons is important, right? Like I said, because it makes it less reactive, it stays in the body, and your metabolism just doesn't get rid of it so easily. There's less hydroxylation. And it stays in the body. This stays in the body much longer than this does, right? So Prozac lasts longer. And the lipid loving is important because it can cross the blood-brain barrier, so it enters the central nervous system much better. And that's where the serotonin transporters are, and it can be blocked. So that's the whole point of all of these. These have additional effect, but serotonin selective, right? Selecting serotonin only to keep the inhibitors from taking up more. Reuptake inhibitor. Reuptake inhibitor. I don't know why I messed that up. It's a reuptake inhibitor because serotonin is associated with mood, right? And you want to keep that in there. So you're stopping reuptake. Well, sertraline has two rings. This is a bicyclical. So there's an aromatic benzene and one saturated cyclohexane. Right? So this looks like carbon, but this one's different, right? Because it's saturated. And this makes it more rigid and bulky than this one does. And the effect that this has on how it works when it's binded is that this is more rigid and will stick to the receptor and not interact with anything as much. So for this is important because this is more fluid and will react. So with antipsychotics, you could interact with it, right? And this will just stay there. We'll select the receptor and stay there. This can interact with more things than this can. And the chlorines, the big difference of these two is the chlorines. It is electron loving and it does make it lipid loving, but it's not as electronegative, and there's only two. And so it doesn't make it as many adjustments when it's there. And it tends to work better for anxiety, panic, OCD, and PTSD because it's more rapid in the onset of how it works. Now I'll talk about the serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. So it's not as selective, right? As name's not selective, but still a reuptake inhibitor. But it includes norepinephrine. So there's duloxetine and venlafaxine, and these are very similar to these, as you notice in the shape, right? There's always a few rings. This is more similar to this, and this is more similar to this because of the bicyclical ring. But the rings are a little bit different, and they all have nitrogen groups, which is important, especially for these because they are very similar to this, but they have an additional target, norepinephrine. So it keeps norepinephrine there too. and this has a big difference on your energy, motivation, and alertness, especially if the patient is low energy. So there is a notable difference, and this is a bit more higher in energy. And so because norepinephrine keeps working in the body, and that's what these are associated with it. So it's a big plus. Also, I think sertraline has a more of effect on mood too, if I'm not mistaken, more than Prozac. I could be wrong. So duloxetine uses the nitrogen in the ionic group, and nitrogen to ionic bond with acid residues on the norepinephrine transporter, and the double ring, right, to fit snugly. I think it's hydrophobic, and it makes a better fit for where it is. But this is what is making the bond with the acid residues, and this works to make ionic bonds with the amino acids of the transporter, because these nitrogens are negatively charged, while the acid residues, which remember, are positively charged. And that's really the key of how this is binding onto there. And so this one is venlafaxine. It also uses the nitrogens, but has 2 carbons off here, so it's a little bit different, right? Second is secondary. The amino acid, works because negative charge and positive charge, and the noticeable differences are in energy. So if you're depressed, or it's not you, but if the patient is depressed, this is the big noticeable difference. This is what you should remember about these. And between these two, these SSRIs, fluoride versus chlorine, and this interacts less, even though this pulls more electrons off of it because it's so strong. But yeah, that's how it works. And the norepinephrine transporter is different from the serotonin transporter in that one is catechol binding instead of indole binding, but otherwise they both use sodium and chloride to drive it. So transporters, right, and neurotransmitters. So that's it for today. Thank you.